Michelle.
Hey Kim, how are you?
Good. It's been a day, hasn't it? It's a Monday.
Yeah, it's, it's Monday all day. It's Monday.
Oh, Mondays. I tell you what, Mondays when you're working and in business, it seems like everything just comes to a head on Monday, and then it gets easier as the week goes. So hopefully, it's just going to get better from here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, welcome back everybody to the Business Chicks. I'm Michelle.
And I am Kim, and we are two business chicks with over 60 years of combined. Every time I say that, I'm just like,
I know.
over 60 years of combined experience in sales, marketing, and leadership. And every week we get really real about what it actually takes to survive and even thrive in business as women. And of course, you men too, but we talk about it from a female perspective.
Yes, and today we're tackling something that a lot of women wrestle with: job hopping. Is it a red flag or is it smart strategy?
I mean, yeah, that's such a tough question. And let's be honest, we've both done it. I know there's
Hmm.
probably most of the people out in our audience have done it. There's even, since I have such a full career, and I'm probably telling on myself here, there's even a few jobs that aren't on my resume for that
Hmm.
very reason, right?
Hmm.
And I think we've all had moments where we thought, am I making a bold move? Is this the right thing for me? Am I doing the right thing? Or am I going to look unstable? Because, especially if you've been at a job, or if you come into a job and you're thinking it's going to be one thing and it turns out to be something else, and you're only there for a short period of time, it's a conversation that goes on in your head, right? It's like, do I just
Hmm.
jump now or do I wait? And in some ways, it's like, okay, well, if I jump now, then I'm going to look unstable,
Hmm.
especially as a woman. But then if I stay 3 months, then I'm going to have to put that on my resume, or I'm going to have a gap,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So it's like, there have been, in my almost 30-year career, there have been 2 times when I haven't stayed for even a month because I would rather look, unstable and
Hmm.
get out of what I knew was not a good situation, was not the situation I wanted to be in, versus I felt like it was going to look worse to have 3 months there, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I've done that, and I know we're going to talk later about specific situations. So I'll talk more about it then. But let's start with that old school thinking. I grew up with my parents who were teachers. They were in the school system, both of them for over 30 years. My mom had 5 brothers and sisters. They were all in the school system, and my grandfather's a plumber. So everybody taught me, you find a good job and you continue to work your way up and you stay there and you're loyal and
Mhm.
you need to have stability, and that was some kind of badge of honor, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, same with my parents, my grandparents. You stay put, stay loyal, and climb that ladder. Today's
Hmm.
ladders have turned into obstacle courses, though. The idea the loyalty equals success doesn't always hold up. I'm very blue collar, my family is, and working in factories, my grandparents for same factory they retired from,
Hmm.
so that was the whole thing. I mean, they were farmers, they worked in the factory, things like that. And it just, the loyalty was both ways, though. That's the
That's a good
difference.
point. Yep.
The loyalty was both ways. There was loyalty from the company, they had a pension,
That's
they
I was
had,
thinking that about
yeah.
and about how the days of the pension are really gone.
Right. Exactly, which I think is part of what kept the loyalty, right? When you move into the
Mhm.
401k, it's a different story. But
Right.
that was my grandparents. But that loyalty is not there from companies or employees anymore.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard these days to be loyal. I can see it from both sides, right? I've owned
Hmm.
my own business, and so I can see it both ways. From our perspective, we've got to have growth, right? And we
Hmm.
know from the things that we've discussed that can be difficult for women, and we know that that only what I think it's like 29% of all CEOs are women. Only 3% of business, what's the name of it? Funding. Um,
Um, the oh my God, why am I
I
drawing a
know,
blank?
me
Yes,
too.
the venture capitalists.
Venture capital. Thank you.
Yes.
Venture capital. Only 3% of all venture capital goes to women. So, in order to move ahead, it's like we've got to continually be strategic, right? Because if there is that glass ceiling, and people will say the glass ceiling has been shattered, I disagree. I think the glass ceiling has been moved up a little. And I
Agree.
think in some industries and in some businesses, maybe that glass ceiling is less prevalent. But I think in general, it's still there a lot more than we would like to admit. And so
Great.
staying in one place can actually hurt your growth. If you are
Mm-hmm.
somewhere for, let's say for 10 years, and this is something that I go back and forth with in my head, and to be completely honest, at our current employer, I go back and forth with this concept of career growth title, because people expect to see growth, right? If you are in an executive position, a leadership position, anybody from the outside in expects to see growth. So staying in one position with one title, it feels, when a company does this, to me, I know it's not intentional in most cases, and it just is what it is. It's the way the company's structured, but it can feel like it's really handcuffing you to that company, because should you ever want to grow, or should something happen at the company, something happen in your situation, you need change financially, they can't support it, whatever, right? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
look like there is a problem with you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where it can hurt your growth, because you're staying loyal, but yet your title's not changing. Your pay maybe only just minorly changing. So what it looks like a problem with you. And so employers, they say they want experience, but then they also want adaptability, people who can pivot, learn new systems, bring fresh perspectives, and grow and demonstrate growth. And if you're in a position or a situation where you can't grow in your current job, but you're staying there because of loyalty, you're hurting yourself to a great extent, because you're making it look like you don't have those things, that you don't have the ability to pivot, learn systems, and bring fresh perspectives. Or the assumption is you would have advanced, right? You would have
Right.
changed the title, you would have gotten raises, you would have grown into senior positions. And so often, those people on the outside aren't looking at what is happening in your company. They're just looking at your title, your position, and they're saying, she's not moving.
Right. And post 2020, job hopping has a new reputation, right? The pandemic made everybody reevaluate their careers.
Mhm.
Suddenly people weren't afraid to ask, is this job aligning with who I am? So the same sort of thing, right? When you're in a position where, am I going to grow? And I'm not talking necessarily up,
Right. Anywhere.
title, anything
Right.
like that. Can I grow at all? Is
Mhm.
this as far as I can go? Is this, if the only place I can go is one level up and my boss is never going to leave, then
Mhm.
then what am I doing? If
Right.
that's the position that someone's in, or if they're in a position of, I can only go to a manager level and then I'm maxed out.
Mhm.
Then we started looking at, in 2020, when we started so much of the work from home and people realized that remote positions were actually very
Right.
effective,
Mhm.
and you could get a lot of productivity out of people, and you actually do have people that are going to be productive at home, and
Mhm.
they appreciate the flexibility of it. It
Mhm.
changed the whole scope of things. And now you're probably seeing it with some that are requiring them to come back to work.
Yeah.
We're gonna see another shift in where people are going and what they're doing.
It's so, and then there's the gig economy, right? So many
Mhm.
people learned that, hey, there's all these tasks out there, and companies learned, oh, well, we can outsource. We don't have to take on
Right.
the,
Mhm.
the hard cost of hiring a new employee. We can outsource. And so
Mhm.
with that new demand for outsourcing came people going, okay, some things that started as a side hustle became their primary job. And when they started making more money at their side hustle than their full-time job, then they're like,
Right.
"Okay, well, I'll do this." So it really did transform things. It really did shake things up. And even
Mhm.
now, in preparation for this, I went and looked through LinkedIn, and the amount of remote positions still, it was like it
Mhm.
went about a year ago, that went down, right? People were trying to
Mhm.
get ready to come back, or not everybody, but a lot of companies were trying to get people to come back to the office. Then
Mhm.
it's like that's reversed again. I think they were
Mhm.
having trouble finding the people that they wanted and that
Mhm.
could do their jobs, and they realized it's a much bigger pool if I can look at the country instead of my little
Right.
city, my
Mhm.
little area. And so I've actually noticed that almost, I would say, and this is just off the top of my head statistic, 95% of the jobs in marketing, for example, in the field
Mhm.
are remote, which I
Mm-hmm.
thought was interesting because a few years ago, post COVID, that had changed. It's like they were trying
Mm-hmm.
to get back to the office, and now it's reverted. They found to find the talent they want, the people
Right.
that pivot, the people
Right.
that they want, which of course then brings in all kinds of other problems. Because if you're opening your job to the country, you're going to get 300, 400 resumes, and then you have AI and all the things, right? So I
Right.
know
Mm-hmm.
you're getting the best people, but it definitely has changed since then. And, it looking at all of that, it's like, I've got to wonder, these people doing the hiring, what are they looking at, right? What are they
Mm-hmm.
looking at? Are they looking at qualifications? Are they looking at titles that you've held? Are they looking at, do you have any gaps? I mean, it's
Right.
overwhelming.
Well, and I think, so we go back to the same thing, to be honest, where men can job hop and be
Mhm,
called strategic, but
mhm.
women do it and we get labeled flighty. So
Right.
it's the same sort of thing, right? If a woman is looking to move to a different company for whatever reason,
Mhm.
whether it's, work life balance, which, just in general is kind of a joke in any job, I think, probably truthfully. As a single mom that I went through that, I can tell you that's it's not that as easy as it sounds, but that is a reality, right? People are
Mhm.
looking for more of that. And to your point with the gig work, I think people found a lot more where they could pick up multiple gigs,
Right.
set their own schedule, and kind of do their own thing as long as they could, know that they were going to have a solid income or know that they could get on contract work, things like that. So then that, brings in the question of the contract work on a resume.
Right, right. How does that look, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, if you've got this contract work, are you
Hmm.
going to be committed to your job? Like, we're dating the company, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like
Exactly.
there's so many things that come into play. And I do agree with you totally that there is a big difference between the way, job hopping, job movement, etc., is handled for women.
Hmm.
And, because just the way I think some people look at women, right? That we are
Yep.
emotional, right? We've had this
Right.
discussion that we are emotional instead of passionate. The
Hmm.
men are passionate, and they are trying to move up, and women are just can't get settled.
Right.
It's crazy, but it's sometimes I even find myself doing it. Like when I'm hiring and looking at
Hmm.
resumes, I find myself making those judgments. So it's so ingrained in us. It's
It is. It is. And I mean, I've had the exact situation. I left the company after 2 years for a bigger leadership role, and it was not a lateral move.
mhm,
I was moving up in the position, and I got the wow, you move around a lot. And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, well, that's how I move up. Because
right.
when I look at it, that actually is how I moved up, was
Mhm,
by moving companies. And
yes.
a lot of that, there are certain companies where I moved up within the company. I don't want it to sound like all
Yeah,
of them.
yeah.
But at the same
We have
time,
30
there
years here, right? There's a long
right, right,
history.
exactly. But the reality is when you start getting into a situation of a company that wants to move you into a position,
Mhm,
but doesn't want to pay you what that position is.
mhm,
They want to pay you based on what you're making now
mhm,
and
mhm. They
just
always
bump it up a
ask that,
little
right?
bit.
They always say,
Right.
"What is your current salary?" It's like, none of your business.
Well,
You
right. And that's the problem because I found that sometimes if you
know?
stay with a company or if I went to a new company in that same position the company was offering me, I could make more at the new company
Right,
because they had what this is what the level is for this job. And at the
right.
company I was at the time, it was, well, yes, but here's what you're making now. We can't take you to that level. Well,
Yep.
then that answers my question of what I need to do.
Yep. That's such a good point because it's like I think sometimes companies, and our company I will say is pretty good at this for a
Mhm.
company, right? Is stopping and evaluating our salaries keeping up with the market, right?
Mhm.
But
Agreed.
I have been in companies that aren't. For example, the education system, the university system is not. They do
Yeah.
not do really hardly
Mhm.
ever. And so that's one of the reasons why I know we're going to talk about it in just a second, like when we've done this, but that's one of the reasons why I left the university system at the height of my career. Once I was
Mhm.
vested, left at the height of my career because I was pretty much maxed out unless I went and got my PhD. In other words, you couldn't get paid what you were worth. You had to do something additional, take on something additional, or get a new degree or whatever to increase your pay. And I just didn't want that for the rest of my life. Like,
Right.
have to do something. You couldn't just be paid what you're worth. You had to do something different. You had to teach a class. You had to teach another class. You had to get another degree. You had to do, you had to do something additional. And that's just the way, unfortunately, the university system is set up. And teachers are the same way. There's what they call increases. And it's just unfortunate because those are such important jobs. But I really do, to take it back to our job hopping discussion, I really do think that is probably one of the biggest reasons, is what you just hit the nail on the head, is that when you can't get in your current job what you can get if you leave, then it kind of forces your hand, and so especially with women, since we're talking about gender, I do feel like sometimes there's that conversation in the background, like, did she leave because she wasn't committed? Back to that dating question.
Right.
Or did something come up with her family? Instead of looking at it as we would with a man and call it career agility, right?
Exactly.
Moving forward. I almost see it in my head like women have to take a spiral versus men can take a staircase. It's like sometimes we have to make little tiny moves all in a circle, right? To get up to where we want to go, versus men just go straight up this ramp or the staircase. That really does seem like that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, the whole thing about it is, again, it comes back to the whole flighty sort of, or strategic thing, right? Because we can't be strategic in a lot of people's minds. We're not being strategic. We're being emotional. So the double standard's real, and it's not that you moved, it's why and how you tell that story when you're going to your next interview that you're wanting to make that move with.
For sure. And so, yes, job hopping, I feel like for me, and I know you well enough to know it's probably the same for you. I feel like anytime I have job hopped has been for one of two reasons. It has been either because it wasn't a good fit, and and that could be the owner, that could be the manager, that could be the people, whatever, right? It just wasn't a good fit. And, or I would say the majority of the time has been strategic. It has been a strategy. It has been, well, I can't get where I want to go here anymore. And so in order to make that move, I've got to go somewhere else. And so that's, that's why I feel like I've done it. But, of course, not all job hopping is strategic. And so we're going to watch this video. And then I know, Michelle, you're going to recap, because I think this video is going to high level go over most of the things that were in the show notes. So we're going to watch this quick video. And this guy, I've never really heard of this guy, but I was really impressed with his video. Oh, hold on. I've got to allow my system settings here. But I was really impressed with his video. And it just, for someone that I've never heard of before, I think he was just pretty amazing. So, okay, I'm going to have to reopen. Hey, sorry about that. I'll edit that out.
That's okay.
But yeah, I had to reauthorize my computer. I don't know why. I guess Chrome updated, and so it made me reauthorize my computer. So when I went to share the screen, it kicked me out. I was like, okay, bye. But anyway,
technology.
Like I said, in post-production, I'll take that out. So, now I can share my screen, I believe. But this guy, I've never heard of him, but I think you're going to like him too. He's really cool. And I love the way he talks about it the same way we've studied it. So he's really neat. But I'm going to change my playback speed here to 1.25 because he does talk a little slow, but I love his accent. So here we go.
Is it a good or a bad thing? Well, once upon a time, we were told to get a job that was secure, that provided stability, and if we worked hard, went above and beyond, and we accepted promotions and climbed that corporate ladder, we would be looked after by the employer. We could pay into our pension and then hopefully retire at 68 to live out our golden years. What a load of BS. That is totally outdated. So let's address the reality of how risky it really is to remain in one job for years upon years and the damage that it can do. And I'm going to go through some different reasons here. Skill stagnation. Very one-dimensional. You never added any new strings to your bow, and you just know that one job and the same tasks. You never explored new skill sets. Economic vulnerability. Your company could be downsizing, restructure, you could be made redundant, or the company gets taken over by AI and you're left wondering, well, what's going on with my job? Slow and limited earning potential. You can only climb the corporate ladder so fast and gain promotions every so often. And even pay rises are marginal throughout the year. 2, 3, 4%. There's a ceiling, there's a cap, it's very limited. Seen as complacent and lazy if you are in a job for too long by new employers. If you go into another job interview and an employer says to you, you've been in your job 15, 20 years. Did you have no growth? Were you not ambitious? Did you not step outside your comfort zone? Did you not think outside the box? That's how they're going to see it. That you've kind of just been a plodder in your last job. I wouldn't hire someone if they turned around to me and said, I'm now looking for a new job, but I was in my job for 20 years. I'd think, well, they probably just wanted to get rid of you after, for so long being in one job. They just probably wanted to get you out. I wouldn't hire someone like that because it does scream there's no ambition or no thinking for yourself. I kind of like solopreneurs and people who think outside the box, right? Mental and emotional risks. There are many people who have been in jobs for years who now suffer with anxiety, being apprehensive, even depression, who are on pills because they're so miserable, they feel so trapped, they go through the motions and they don't know how to get out. And they're being harassed, bullied, they're in a toxic environment, they're being micromanaged, they're on performance.
I gotta say something real quick. When he said that, I had not thought about the fact that there are people who probably feel, which I guess is what he's talking about, very trapped
Right.
in their own in the one job. And whereas, we might look at it as loyalty because we are, executive in nature and we have that tendency. There's probably people that are at companies for that 10, 15, 20 years who don't know how to leave, right? Almost like leaving a bad relationship where, they're not happy, but they don't know how to get out because they don't know how to go, advocate for themselves. And they've been doing this one job for so long. And I hadn't thought about that because we're so far from that. But I really think that that's a subject that I'd really like to dive into in one of our shows with, especially with women, is how to know when to leave, right? How to do it.
No, I agree. And I think that it gets into that anxiety freeze or depression freeze where they've been in this toxic environment at a workplace for so long and they almost feel like they couldn't go anywhere else to do the job or a higher job because that's what they're being told where they are. They're, those sort of things. So I think that would be a great topic for us to get into because there are definitely strategies for that.
Right.
And that's part of the resilience course that I have too, is dealing with some of that freeze. So yeah, I think that's definitely something, but it definitely hits the nail on the head. And I didn't think about it either until he was just talking about it.
Yeah, because we're not like that, and so I was listening to him go, why would that cause, and then I started thinking about it and I'm like, well, if you don't know how to leave, right? You don't know how to go look for another job. Maybe you've been in this job for 10, 15 years. And before that, you were at another job for 10 years and you don't know how to leave. Like you don't know how to look for a new job, how to update your resume, what to say, what wins, what to ask for in terms of pay, right?
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because it's like, God, well, if you hate where you are, and I don't know why you'd hate where you are if you're there 15 years, but I guess people do it in marriages, right?
Well, I was going to say there's plenty of reasons, people that are stuck on paychecks that they know they're getting their paycheck. It's not completely miserable here. They're not great, but I can leave when I need to go do something for my kids, or I can, there's all these things. It's just, kind of, it's no different than a toxic relationship, in my opinion, right? You talk yourself into, I can stay here because I get these other things that I may not get somewhere else, because you don't know what else is out there and you don't have the confidence. A lot of times people don't have the confidence and haven't been, built up enough in their positions because they've had bad leadership.
Yep. That's such a good point. And, it's like, you don't even know, I think, like you were saying, it's a trade-off, right? You're like, oh, well, I stay here because, or these people might stay here because this benefit, and this benefit. But that means you're also not seeing what could be on the other side, like maybe something better, right? It might not be, you might lose that, but chances are, if you're strategic, you might gain something better.
Exactly.
It's so interesting to me. Anyway, I'll keep playing until we're going to go to about the 4:39-minute mark in this one section, but I just had to jump in there because I thought that was so interesting.
performance reviews, and they just don't do anything about it, but they're miserable, they're unhappy. Gallup's did a survey last year. 77% of all global working adults disliked their jobs, but yet they remain for many different reasons. But the point is, mental and emotional risk is one of the biggest. Industry-specific risks. When you only know one thing and you're on this hamster wheel of just doing the same thing day in, day out, Groundhog Day, when new opportunities come, you cannot take them because you only know a set of tasks and the to-do list that you do every day, and you know nothing else. So you're very, very kind of closed and just sucked into doing this one job. So you can't expand and take new opportunities because you've been so industry specific. And when tech comes in and you have to learn how to use laptops and software, you're out of your depth. You've got no idea because you're outdated. And that's a problem with staying in a place for too long. Loss of identity. You don't know who you are anymore. I saw this all the time in my last job. People who would pretend to be a character, they'd brown nose, they'd try and fit in with the cliques, they'd try and get involved in office politics, and they would tell people what they wanted to hear, you know, very people pleasing. And you do that for so long, you become someone you don't really recognize, and then that's when you get home and you question yourself, and typically where someone hits a midlife crisis because they get to 40, 50 and they look back on their life thinking, who the hell am I? I've got no purpose, I've got no fulfillment. I've been pretending to be someone at work just so I don't stand out and I can keep my job because I fear losing it, because I become financially independent on that one company. Very dangerous loss of identity. And then sense of lost time. You know, getting to that ripe old age of 55 and 60 and looking back at your life and thinking, I've devoted 20, 30 years to one company that has just made me redundant or fired me or didn't really care about me, and that time's never coming back. Again, I talk about this quite a lot in my content. Time. It is the most precious thing, and you have to start living life for you. And that's a very common thing, is feeling that you have lost time. And suppressed dreams. You know, we all had dreams once upon a time, but as soon as you signed up and you went in that job interview and you told them, I can do the job, boss. Yes, me, boss. Pick me, boss. I can do the job. You know, you can rely on me. I'll work hard and go above and beyond, boss. And then all those things you wanted to do, you know, you were creative, you had dreams, maybe you wanted to start your own company one day. Nope, they've all been suppressed because you've been in a company for so long. Now, what are the pros of job hopping? And there's so many pros.
I'll stop it there on this one, but isn't that, it's just kind of mind blowing, some of the things that he was saying. And even, you know, the whole 55 to 60.
Right.
And you look back and you're like, where is the time?
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people, and it scares me that I know this many people. Personally, I know so many people that have put 29, 30 years into a company, and the company has let them go in the 29th year, since pensions are no longer really a thing.
Yep.
And the company has let them go because they need to bring in new blood. And I know, I mean, like literally two of my good friends this year, this happened to their husbands, where they were in, you know, and they got good severance, right? But they were in extremely high leadership positions. They had done a good job. You know, they were there. One of them was there 25 years. The other one was there like 23. And the just company let them go and didn't really give them a reason other than we're restructuring your department. That seems to always be the line, right?
That's the answer.
We're restructuring your department. And like you were saying in the beginning, you know, loyalty used to go both ways. What kind of loyalty is that? Because now, I mean, they had to go, one of them even at their company, and hopefully his wife, if she listens to this, she'll know I'm talking about him, but even at their company, 11 months, because at 12 months, if he went over 12 months and went back to the company, had to start at a new pay level as if it was the first time. And so it was like 12 months and 3 days, they offered him a new job, lower than his old job.
And, you know, when you're with a company that long, I feel like, that's part of your identity. So, and I've seen people who have been with companies for 20, 30 years and then been phased out or pushed into early retirement or something like what you're talking about. And I've seen it be a very dark place for them. And it's a very difficult thing because for that many years, it defined their life. And you see people who think about that, like he was talking about, you see people look back. And I think this is probably, you know, a pretty strong thing when you've spent that much time with a company, but you see people look back and think about what they missed with their family, what they gave up to put in the time with that company. And then when it came down to it, that company was replacing them before the seat was cooled off from them being there. And it sends people a lot of times into a very depressive place because they don't know what to do. That's been their life. And now what are they going to do? No one wants to hire me. I'm, you know, in my 50s, 60s, no one's going to want to hire me now. You know, I'm too old for that. You know, what do I do? How do I do anything? Because that's all they've known.
It's really such a cruel thing. And that's
Mhm.
one, thing that really makes you question loyalty, right?
Right.
And are people having these conversations with their workplace? Like,
Mhm.
what do you see for me? What do you
Right.
see? And I would say if there is no growth plan, then it's time to, as Vince said, it's time to be looking elsewhere, right? I mean,
Right.
if you cannot grow, then why are you there? We're not born to stand still. And
Right.
some of us are really not born to stand still. And so if you know that there is nowhere to go, then it's almost as if the company is saying to you, this
This is it. This is all you're going to get. This is,
right,
this is your top, you
right. So
know?
it's really, it's a thing. And so it's
Mhm.
definitely something to think about. And so do you want to recap, the
Yeah.
smart reasons to make a move so we can just
Yeah,
remind
and there's some smart reasons to make that
right.
move, right? Like we're hitting a ceiling, like we said, there's no room for growth.
Mhm.
You're at the top of your game. You're at the top of the, and it doesn't even have to be the top title. If you're at the top of the
Right.
pay for
Mhm.
what you're doing and you don't see any growth inside, if you're at the
Mhm.
top position and the person above you is not going anywhere and you know that, what's
Mhm.
that look like for you? When your values or your leadership style clash with the culture. And
Mhm.
if you're someplace and you see, and I've seen this happen kind of to what we're talking about now,
Mhm.
management changes, leadership changes to corporations, and all of a sudden, what used to be the values of that company are no longer really the
Yeah.
same.
Mhm.
When you're starting to clash at that level, that's
Mhm.
not someplace that you're going to be able to stay or
Mhm.
grow or do anything. When you're underpaid and the market says you're worth more, just like we talked about earlier, when the company's not willing to pay you your worth for what you're doing or the position that you've been doing without the pay,
Yep.
that's when it's time to move on and know your worth.
Mhm.
Make sure you understand it. Reevaluate that every couple of years. Do the
Absolutely.
research, find out what your value is, find out what these things are.
Mhm.
When the learning curve is flattened and you're coasting. I've
Mhm.
been in this position too. And this is big to me because when I can't learn anymore,
Mhm.
that's not a fun position for me. And
Yeah.
and I don't mean learn a product or learn a whatever. If there's not something that I'm in, like for me
That
right
you're
now,
passionate about, right? That we're
yeah, for
passionate
me right now, I have to have something that, and I've always been this way. I have to have something where I'm like, okay, I'm not waking up every day like, the mouse on, the hamster on the wheel and
about.
just doing everything out of habit and, that sort of thing. What can I do today to make something better or bigger or, whatever the situation is for the position?
100%. And for me, and I know for you too, passion about what we do is so important. It's an
Hmm.
integral part of who we are. And I would say, if there's a woman that's listening to this, or even a man, it's probably
Hmm.
important for you too, or you wouldn't be listening to things like this, right? And so now or in the future, it's important to you. And I think sometimes that is so under examined, not understood, right?
Hmm.
Is that people who are dynamic, who are going to give to an organization, who are going to drive an organization forward, are not going to be content with coasting, are not going to be
Right.
content with a flat learning curve. They're not going to be content with being underpaid. They're not going to be content with no room to grow. And if you don't nurture that, it's like taking a tiger and expecting it to stay in a cage, right?
Hmm.
And if you're going to keep the tiger in the cage, the tiger's going to eventually break out. And and it's probably not going to be pretty. That's probably a horrible analogy, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? It's like if you want kind of what we talked about with a lot, right? If you
Hmm.
want the good, if you want
Hmm.
the pushing, the progress, the movement, then if it's not rewarded, that is what is going to result in job hopping. It's going to result in people leaving. And it boils down to companies need to take care of their people. And
Absolutely.
and know your people, because what may make Susie, and if you're Susie watching this, no offense, but Susie, who's in one certain job, she may be content with that. She may
Hmm.
be fine with that. She may be just want to do that one thing well.
Absolutely.
That's who she is.
Hmm.
But then you may have, Teresa. I'm trying to use names that we don't have at work. So then you may have Teresa who is ambitious and wants to,
Mhm.
and if you treat Teresa like you treat Susie, you're going to lose Teresa and you're going to get a whole bunch of Susies and the company's not going to grow, right? So
Absolutely.
need to be aware of that. And so I think, to kind of bring this back to our job hopping, it really needs, employers need to look at how they look at job hopping, right?
Yes, exactly.
Really get at the heart of why people job hopped, right? And what do we think automatically? Like I told you, sometimes I am guilty of thinking that, like, was she not committed? Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're of that age where a certain bit of it was ingrained into us too, right?
Sure.
So I do a little bit of that. Was she not committed? Did she, is she going to stay here? Instead of viewing it as a fact finding mission, trying to get to the heart of why, because it matters, right? Why it matters.
So I think that's huge, right? Too, because I think you bring up a good point of, is she going to stay here? So that to me is a huge thing. I think that comes up in the, and I've done it. I've had conversations with people, and I feel like in the conversation, you can tell where their mindset is, right? So if they're looking to just come in here because I want to move up, I
Right.
like some of the things, I like what your company is, what has offer, whatever a situation is, but you can tell that they're just wanting to move up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good fit. But so it's like, that is the key to making those moves, not look like you're running,
Right.
right, from
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
but you have to make it look like you're running towards something, as
I
opposed
like
to,
that.
I want to get my foot in the door
Yeah.
and then go up. That's not how you should be making that move.
I love what you just said. Not that you want to make it clear that they're not running from something, they're running to something. I love that. I think that's a great way to phrase it, because that is a good way when employers, when we're hiring, right? Trying to get it to the heart of, are they running from something? Are
Right.
they, because that's probably someone that maybe isn't the best. It might be sometimes, right? But that's that first warning sign, that first
Correct.
red flag, right?
Mhm.
Or are they moving to? Is it talking about the future, their progress, their momentum, and there's some progression, right? There's
Right.
some, increasing, not just same title, but I mean, one of the things I know, if I ever go anywhere else, I'll have to explain is why I moved from a CMO to a director of marketing, right?
Right.
Why
Right.
did you do that? Because I know
Right.
that if I saw that on somebody's resume, I would be like,
Mhm.
what? And
Mhm.
there's very good reasons for it. But, I feel like that's something that would have to be explained, because it goes against that clear progression, right? It goes
Right.
backwards.
You went
So,
backwards, right?
yeah, so I think, that's a problem. And so one of my favorite persons that talks about business, and what's strange is I use him in my leadership training, Simon Sinek. And I love everything the way he presents leadership. And I use a lot of his videos, but ironically, he's never really been a CEO except for of his company, from what I've heard. But I love listening to him talk. He just makes everything so clear. And in this video, he's going to talk about, like, the risk of job hopping and its impacts and what it looks like to the employer. And this, he does, to be fair, again, I love this guy. I think he's very, very smart. He does work with CEOs of all the biggest companies. Like Simon is a huge name. So he has been talking in the kind of preview to this videos. He has been talking to CEOs and asking what they're seeing about job hopping since COVID, kind of what you were talking about. And this is what he talks about, his fear, and about how it makes people look at the job hopper. So here,
fear is that if we flash forward 5 years, my fear is that if we flash forward 5 years, there's going to be a disproportionately high number of people who have 8 jobs in 5 years. And what's going to happen is an employer is going to look at them and be like, I can't take the risk that you're going to stick around. I'm not hiring you. You sound like an amazing candidate, but you're too high risk for me. And because you've had so many jobs over such a short period of time, you actually haven't stuck around long enough to build up a skill set or know what it's like to manage a storm, because you've stuck around in the good times and bailed in the bad times. And so you have now been in the workforce for 5 years, but you don't have 5 years of work experience. You have 4 months of work experience. And so I don't want you either. My fear.
See, that's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
him talking about, that it looks like you don't know how to deal with the hard times, right? But we're talking about, in the preview of this, is he's talking about candidates that have been in like really powerful roles and have learned a lot, and they're just constantly kind of grabbing, right? It's one of those things you've heard about job hopping of the last few years, especially with millennials, where they'll do a year just to get what they can get, and they kind of milk it, and they go somewhere else and they milk it. And so that's what he's talking about, is these really high achieving people that do a lot, but they get bored quickly. They go, they, hit it hard, learn what, again, it's back to that dating analogy, right?
Right. Speed dating.
Yeah, speed dating, and they're getting what they can get out of that job. And so they probably bring a lot to the table, but are you just the next rung on the ladder? Or that would worry me.
And that's a valid point, right? So it's funny because looking at the show notes, and this feeds right into it, right? Because for me, it really isn't about the number of jobs.
Right.
So this goes twofold to me. Is this a scenario where somebody's going to adjust their resume and, not lie on it,
right,
but skew it so that it doesn't look like they have that many jobs? If people are pushing people away for that reason, then we push the whole scenario into do you have to now lie on your resume?
Right. Maybe
fudge your resume
before that one, right?
Right.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I mean, luckily, there was an 8-year period where I had my own business, my own agency. In that 8-year period, there were several roles that I did as an interim basis for companies, right? Where, and they knew, I mean, I was operating, it wasn't anything secretive. I was operating under my own company, but I held an interim COO role at a book publisher in that period when I owned my own company. If I listed everything I did, it would look very odd. It would look like I was job hopping, even though it was all under my umbrella of my consultancy. I could imagine if somebody looked at that from the outside, it would look very inconsistent, very job hoppy, right?
Because it's but those now they call fractional jobs, right?
Right.
Fractional worker. So now we have, kind of that to lead into those things. But, everybody has a story. And so that's why I say, to me, it's not about the number of jobs. It's about the story. Tell me how you got there. Why did you change roles? What was, and is, it's one of those things that, are they in the same industry? And it's momentum.
That's important.
Right. So if it's the same industry, which this is part of the beauty of being in sales. I'm always a salesperson.
Right? Yeah. Marketing's that way too. Yeah.
Products can change.
Yeah.
Sales are the same. Marketing too. Right. So it's the same sort of situation. But if you're in the same industry and you're not making lateral moves every time, to me, that would be a different story. So those 8 jobs have a story with them. Do they have the right story?
Time to get the story right. You have to put in effort to pull the story out. I mean, this is teaching me something, like for the next person I hire, to be more careful, right? Not careful necessarily, but more thorough, more more concerted in my research and in my delving into their experience, because there can, clearly be pros to job hopping. As I'm thinking, about my own experience, is like, I feel like there's no industry I don't know, because of the fractional work I did under my own company. I worked for a book publisher, I did it for an app. And for the first, $4 million month for an app, did it for a real estate company, a builder. So I feel like I know so much that, versus a lot of times you'll have a marketer that specializes in SaaS, right? Software as a service, or you'll have a marketer that specializes in real estate or banking or legal. I've done all of those, right? But so it would have to be, if I was going to look for a job, it would have to be somebody willing to take the time to listen to all that, and listen to the pros of job hopping, which, going back to our Aaron guy, he's going to talk about, the next thing he's going to talk about are the pros. And when he was going through them, it again made me stop and think, because sometimes I know I've been guilty of, when interviewing somebody, of, I guess, looking at job hopping negatively
Mhm.
or asking those questions again. So let's see some of the benefits of job hopping from Mr. Aaron.
And it works in today's day and age. And you should be job hopping once every sort of 1.5, 2 years. Because we're in a fast moving world right now. So move fast with it. So faster career growth, learning and gaining new skill sets a lot faster. You avoid burnout because you're always on the move. You're more financially independent because you realize you can rely on yourself to 2 years here, 2 years there, 2 years here, move there, increase my pay, go up on the ladder. You know, you're dependent on yourself. It's somewhat like almost like a solopreneur, but still within the corporate world. Gaining real life perspective. You learn a lot quicker that companies just use you, therefore use them. Use them, learn the skill sets, get a higher pay rise, move on to another job. You wake up. Companies will get rid of you in a heartbeat. You're all just a number, and that's the reality. Avoid over-investing into one company. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Building resilience. You gain more confidence, and you don't fear the risk of losing your job because you're always willing to move. You learn to innovate and adapt, which is really important for someone who can go on and personally develop. You enhance your work-life balance because you're always willing to move to a company that has better shifts or provides remote working, or you can do a couple of days in the office and then a couple of days at home. You're willing to move to what works with your life. And I'm an advocate of that. Design your life opposed to being assigned one. Avoiding mental breakdowns. If you're not getting too emotionally attached with the workplace and the co-workers within, then you stay very disconnected. So you apply self-mastery. Again, I talk about this, which is a great thing. Never get emotionally involved. Therefore, you avoid all these mental breakdowns. Also,
Okay. So I'm going to stop it there because he goes into, we'll pick back up with him in a minute. But that some of his stuff, I'm not sure I agree with. I'm not sure that I agree with, that frequent of job hopping, but I kind of feel like that's a generational thing. Like,
Well, so I agree. And so I think what's interesting is when he said that, I immediately was like, oh,
me too.
right? Like, didn't think about that.
Mhm.
But it also makes sense.
Mhm.
Now, it's not as easy, in my opinion, right now to do that because
Right.
of the way the market is, because of the
Agreed.
way AI is weeding out resumes, things like that. I mean,
Mhm.
I hear of people who are applying and it's ridiculous,
Yeah.
right?
They're
As
getting
far as not getting through things
400,
like
yeah,
that.
400 resumes
Yeah.
per job. I mean, I've talked to people,
It,
friends of mine that are hiring. I have a friend who is hiring for an entry-level marketing position in Franklin, Tennessee. And she said she's getting like 100 a day. She's like,
oh, I'm
there's
sure.
no way that I can find the best
Right.
person,
And it would just be, but I think to his point that consistency doesn't mean staying put.
Mm-hmm.
Consistent growth is what they're looking for, consistent purpose, consistent
Mm-hmm.
excellence. So being really good at whatever it is you're doing
Mm-hmm.
and picking up to your point, what we have picked up over the years, which is knowledge of
Right.
building industry, education.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's, industrial,
Mm-hmm.
office, all of these things, corporate world we've both had.
Mm-hmm.
Getting all of those nuggets from each one and just building that up is the key. Now, could I stay somewhere 2 years and go somewhere else? I mean, I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my choice at all to do that because that's not what I wanted to do. I found out that I had more value somewhere else, and it actually fell in my lap. I wasn't even looking. It was one of those where they came to me about it. And so that would never be my first choice,
Mm-hmm.
but I can see how it would be. And again, generational.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We still, even though companies don't have loyalty to us, we still were kind of in that mentality, I feel like. Whereas my kids, maybe not so much,
Right.
even though, my oldest daughter's been with the same company for probably 10 years now. So,
Wow. Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head a minute ago, when you were talking about fractional work, right? Because I'm thinking back on my resume and I've, been at my current job now for 6 years, but prior to that, aside from owning my own company, I was pretty much a 3-year person. And I think in every time was a valid reason. I, explained why I left education and I just didn't want to get stuck there. I didn't want to get stuck where I had to consistently add more work, more responsibility, more education in order to advance. Right. Then I went into the mortgage industry and then the mortgage market crashed. So I had to totally regroup. And that's when I started my own agency. But I did a lot of fractional work. A lot of my clients were 1 and 2 year clients. So I kind of did what he's saying. and they all knew about each other. So it was nothing secret, but it was almost like I had 4 or 5 full-time jobs, right? I've always operated like that. We know,
Right.
that's just my tendency. And I think
Mhm.
it's because of that passion to learn and advance and, and learn new things and explore new territory. But this is aside from my own company where I was still working with multiple companies at the same time, this is the longest I've been in a job. And I feel like that does have something to do with age. I feel like my learning, I don't want to say is done.
Mhm.
But I know when it comes to
Mhm.
marketing, you're not going to surprise me, right?
Mhm.
I'm,
Mhm.
and I keep my finger on the pulse. I do continuing education. I'm constantly learning. I don't feel like there's anything in marketing that's going to be brand new to me. AI is kind of that way. So how passionate I am about it because it's something new, right?
Mhm.
Marketing, I think I'm not done. I don't mean done with marketing, but you're not going to teach me, somebody's not going to teach me something that is just going to blow my mind that I don't know, right? About marketing. There may be
Right.
a new tactic, there may be a new platform, but in general, it all goes back to the same principles and probably the same with you with sales. It's you're not going to teach me something I don't know. So I think for me, looking back at what he's saying, there might be a time and a place where I think if you are ambitious and you have the financial security to do that,
Mhm.
I can see where you could learn in 10 years, 5 jobs in 10 years, what probably takes someone else 20 to learn, right? It's like
Oh, easy. Mhm. Well, and I think for you and I, it's different now because I feel like, first off, I feel like you and I are very similar in most aspects. But I think for us right now, we're more interested in teaching
correct.
than learning.
Why
Like
would
I'm
totally
looking,
right?
right, exactly. We're more interested in, even with our teams,
Mhm.
I'm looking to teach them so that all of my team can grow into their next situation to level them up.
Mhm.
Not so much about me because I feel I'm very happy with where I am and what I'm doing in life and everything, right? So to me, it's more about helping others now get to the place that you and I have managed to get to.
Right.
But we didn't have the guidance of us to
Right.
get there, and it would have been great to be able to have that. So I think that's where you and I are in that capacity, to me at least.
I mean, everything you're saying resonates so much with me because we have a young girl in our office who, has done a couple internships with us. She's done one with me, she's done one with someone else, and she always used to laugh because I would go into these like teaching moments, all right? And I would say, you probably don't want to know all this. And she'd be taking notes. She's like, yes, I do. It's great. She's like, I'm getting exactly what you're saying. The
Mm-hmm.
benefit of your 30 years of experience in
Yes.
like a 10-minute discussion,
Mm-hmm.
because she'd ask me a question and then I would go into the background of why I'd answer and then go to the background of why it's that way and how and da 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 da. And I'm like, this is stuff that took me 30 years to figure
Mm-hmm.
out. And she gets it,
Oh
and I'm
yeah.
watching her do things that she technically shouldn't be able to do well because it did take me a long time to do it. But then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I just gave her all my hacks, right?
And she's a sponge,
Right,
right?
correct.
So the one that you're talking about, who we love, and she is a sponge, and
Right.
she is just soaking in everything. And she's right out of college,
Mm-hmm.
so she's got that great, just fresh perspective. And to be able to have the mentors that she has in the company is just an amazing thing. I didn't have that in my first job. I'm sure you didn't either. And I mean, that would have been an amazing thing to be surrounded by, strong women to
Absolutely.
gather that information from. And I've met with her, and we've had conversations, and she's, amazing. And I honestly, and I've told them that she will grow into and could do my job.
Yeah,
Like,
she's
I
very,
think that's
yeah.
where she's, like she could absolutely grow into my position. And I love that because I think she would be great at that.
And then, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and, but she's like, I wish I would have had that. But in our time, we didn't have those strong female people in the company, or I didn't, at least.
I had a man who had strong female daughters that he had
Mhm.
raised up, so he got it. Not like quite, not 100% like a woman would,
Right.
but I got really lucky in that he was
Mhm.
all about women being strong and powerful. So I did get
Right.
lucky in that aspect, but I didn't have the female example of it,
Mhm.
aside from his daughters who were in the military, and I got to see how they did things and learned how they did things through him, which I do
Right.
believe helped me, right? Because he would talk
Sure.
to
Of
we would be
course.
driving to main campus, which was a 2.5 hour drive, and he would tell me these things, like they were going through and challenges, that he was allowed to tell me, and telling me how they handled it and how he'd advise them. So I did learn a lot from that. But I think what we were just talking about her and our job and what we didn't have makes me really get back to what he was saying is that, I think maybe when you're younger, when you are ambitious, maybe it's not a bad thing to job
Mhm.
hop, I mean, what about you? I mean, do you have a personal story where you job hopped and it either scared you and paid off, or that you job hopped and it backfired? I mean, I kind of told you mine, but
Yeah. So, I mean, I did. I did leave a safe job,
Mhm.
partially because for a couple of reasons. I actually took a pay cut as a single mom to leave a job that was a toxic environment. And everybody said I was crazy, but the position I went into actually was stretched me as far as my ability to manage people and
Mhm.
to in the leadership and operations side of things. And
Mhm.
so it taught me a whole new skill set. It taught me more in the operations side, which I had some, but had not had as much at that point,
Mhm.
and the leadership in that, and how sales and marketing and operations all kind of come together,
Right.
in the company. And so it taught me a lot of that, which actually led me to where I am now.
Mhm.
So it was a stretch then, and
Mhm.
it was scary because I was a single mom at the time, and that was a strong leap that I took, a leap of faith.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
And it took me some time, but then it got me here, and
Yeah.
I'm very happy with that. But that experience that I had and I gained from that company
Mhm.
gave me what I needed to be where I am now.
That's amazing. And I mean, I have that publisher they used to work for. It was also a guy at the head of the brand, and he was into self-development. And that's a real mild way of saying it, but he's a really cool guy. But one of the things that was at the core of his teachings, and his books were called Thank God I, and it was about finding the pleasure or the blessing in life's challenges, right? Thank God I was robbed. Thank God I,
Mhm.
lost
Mhm.
my kids, whatever. And it's about how if you can look back and see the things that, I mean, this is very high level, but look back in
Mhm.
your life and look at things that happen and learn to see the blessing that came from it,
Mhm.
that almost everything has that, right? And if you
Mhm.
can learn to look back and see that, it actually helps you go through difficult things because you
Mhm.
know that you're going to come out the other side with something that's good, right? So you kind of
Exactly.
realize, you stop fearing, the bad, and you stop idolizing the good, because you realize it's all
Yeah.
kind of good and it's all kind of bad. So he calls it equilibration. But my point in bringing that up is that when we talk about career stories, I think ultimately it's about doing what is right for you,
Mhm.
right? And it
Exactly.
then on the side of the employer, which my first job, I told you, was mind blowing, because it's the first time I'd ever truly managed people other than waitresses, right? This is
Mhm.
my first professional job at the university, and I managed indirectly 117 people and directly about 14. And so I was, associate regional director of the Florida and Western Region Director of Distance Learning, which was essentially 15 sites in 8 states plus undergraduate global distance learning. I was 32 years old and essentially second in command. So all of the people that worked for that region, including all the professors, technically I was their boss, but in my direct office, I had anytime anywhere between 14 and 17 people at any given time. And I had never been a manager or a leader. And I had to quickly learn how bad I was at it first, but then how to be better at it, right?
Mhm.
And so, looking back as from a leadership perspective, I think the biggest thing we can do as leaders is listen, right? Is listen,
Mhm.
because the times that I've left jobs have been when my leadership stopped listening to me.
Mhm.
And so when
Me
we're
too.
hiring, we need to make sure we're listening to the story that comes with the person,
Mhm.
because I've kind of changed my perspective on job hopping as we've been discussing
Me
this. I mean,
too.
it's funny because I didn't think this was going to be one of my favorite topics. It actually really spoke
It's
to me.
Me too. It's really interesting because I felt the same way. I felt very like,
Ambivalent
oh,
about
we
it.
know this.
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But it's opened my eyes a lot to
Absolutely.
it as
Yeah.
well.
I think it's important because it's like, well, I'm finding my own biases in it, right? As we're discussing, I'm like recognizing, and that's one of the biggest things I teach about leadership is self-awareness. Is that's the first step to leadership, is understanding where your blind spots are. And that is a blind spot for me, is biases that I didn't know I had because of my age, probably.
Sure.
And because they've been imposed on me, right? The women, the job hopping, that kind of thing. That I think I'm going to look at job hopping at least with a different lens, and ask different questions than I have in the past, because I think it can say actually good things about somebody if they're willing to take a chance on themselves, like you did. If they're willing to, if they're doing it because they are passionate and they just need passion, well, then that becomes up to me to keep them passionate enough to stay, right? If I can't keep them as their leader passionate enough in their job to stay there, that's on me. That's not on them.
Right, because that's about communication, and that's about understanding your team or your employee or your, whatever the situation is. And that, to your point, when leadership stopped listening to you, it's the same thing for us. We have to be having those conversations and understand, where they are, and even in interviews, having those conversations of understanding that.
Yeah, because when you have a team of high performers, you cannot just say, okay, here we are, little trained monkeys, do your tricks and keep doing them just the same way that you've always done them year after year after year. That's not, if you want high performers, that you can't do that, right? You can't treat it like that. And
you're not going to keep them.
And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, multiple things at one time, ADHD, bless me. I'm thinking, am I engaging my team enough? Am I giving them enough opportunities? We know I have a guy that's been there, 16 years now, I think. And it's like, where is his next step, right? Where, we don't want to lose that knowledge. What do I want to do to make sure it's not just about the company, right? It's about the people. The people, what Richard Branson said, leaders are supposed to worry about the people, and then they'll worry about the work. Leaders make sure that we treat our people well, and they'll do the work well. That's not exactly how he said it, but I always mess up analogies. Means the same thing. And it just gets me thinking that that's kind of the point of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're a woman and you're out there listening to us sometime in the future and you are worried about being labeled a job hopper, I would say own your narrative. Really figure out why you did it, right? Why you did it, what the positive was, like we're talking about here, right? What did you gain from it? And that's the story you need to tell. Don't apologize, but talk about the intent and how you grew and what you did. And if your interviewer is not asking the right questions, shame on them, but make sure you pull that out. You say, hey, and I would be so impressed. I don't know about you, Michelle. I'd be so impressed if I wasn't asking the right questions, if someone said, hey, I know you're looking at my resume and it looks like there's some job hopping going on. Let me explain that to you. Let me tell you a story about my career, right? I'm being in marketing. If somebody did that to me, let me tell you a story about my career. Here's where I started. Here's what I've learned. There's nothing I can't tackle because I know this, this, and this. And that's what I was trying to do. I wanted to make sure when I found the job I wanted to stay in, that I knew everything I needed to know and I wasn't going to get restless, but I could bring all of that to one place and just use it so powerfully. If somebody told me that, I'd be like, okay, you're hired.
Right. Exactly. Because they thought about it, and it's the same as, the whole, like, instead of saying I wasn't happy, I was ready for more.
Right.
That tone changes everything.
It does.
Doing that.
It absolutely does. And I think the key is realizing that job hopping doesn't have to define you. It's why you did it and the pattern of growth that you're able to not just know, because I think in the past I've known it, but I don't know that I've ever articulated it that well. Now I know after coming out of this session, that's how I would phrase it is, look at what you're getting. I say it like I probably said it to you. I know I probably said it to my team. Is rarely, and I don't mean it from a conceited perspective. I mean it from this perspective is rarely will you get a marketer who has the experience in every area of marketing in every industry that I have, because most people specialize. Now, does that mean I'm not a master in SaaS? Absolutely. But if you have a company that also wants to have an app, I'm your girl, right? So it's, and I don't mean me, but I mean, there's people like me out there that probably aren't getting a fair shot because we as leaders, we as employers aren't asking the right questions. Right. And if that is that person that happens to be listening to this one day, if we don't ask you the right questions and metaphorically, you need to tell your story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because every move builds your network, your confidence, your impact. That's not instability, that's strategy. Like you said, you're building your ability. Every move builds your ability in some form.
Yep.
Somewhere, like every step I took built me to be where I am right now. And where I am right now is the ability to help others grow.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And I know I have this line in my show notes, but I got to give you credit for it because it's absolutely perfect. As you had written in there, career architect. And I love
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
That is so good, Michelle. That's a great way to put it, because that's essentially what you should be doing. If you're out there listening to this, don't let your career happen to you. And that's kind of one of the points, I guess, of why we're doing all of this is don't let everything happen to you. Take control of it, right? Don't let all the things we've talked about, right? Work relationships. Don't let, your passion and being labeled as too much or emotional control. Take control of your narrative. And I think, Michelle, that's a course we got to make is
I agree.
Career architect.
I agree.
That's what it boils down to is, and I'm floored that this topic has invigorated me so much because
Me too.
Anticipate it.
Me too. Yeah, no, I was not expecting it. I love it. I love this.
Yeah.
I love the whole show because it was not at all what I expected. When I was putting together the show notes, it got me, it got me thinking, and then your videos just added right into it.
It's like, honestly, I think it boils down to why we're here. Why we're doing this is we want to help you, who are listening, architect your career instead of letting it happen to you. Because I feel like that's what happens to so many of us, especially women. And that's not saying, again, that men are bad or anything like that. It's just because of the way we were raised, the way we were, the
societal norms.
Yeah, everything. And I think so many women but men too, let their career happen to them. And I think that's where we can also cross the gender in our courses.
Absolutely.
Is that career architect, I think, is important for men as much as for women. And I don't think that's gender specific. I think that's one we need to do that's both.
I think so. And I think that needs to be our next course or our book.
Yep, I think so too. Architecting your career. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, make sure you subscribe if you're watching this later, now, whatever, and tell a friend. And again, this show, if you're in this particular one, if you don't watch any of them so far, watch this one because this is so important because I think it boils down to if you're going to be happy in your career. And the only way you can be happy is by taking control of it.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep leading, keep learning, keep making bold moves. Bye, guys.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Good night, Michelle.
Night.